Hello, I'm Dave Moss, founder of the Unfunded List and host of the Open Door Philanthropy podcast. Today's guest is, he told me to call him Kim. Dr. Kim Tan is a biotech entrepreneur, chairman of SpringHill Management, and a pioneer of social impact investing. He spent the last 2 decades building enterprise-based alternatives to traditional charity. Most recently, through the Conservation and Rural Enterprise Care Project. Kim describes himself as a disillusioned philanthropist. And today we're going to dig into where that disillusionment came from, what he's built in response, and where I think things get a little bit more complicated than just aid doesn't work. Hello, Kim. Welcome to Open Door Philanthropy.
Hi, Dave, and thanks for having me.
Fans of the show know that I like to just sort of dive right into it with my guests. So let's do that. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Grew up in Malaysia. Grew up poor in rural Malaysia. My parents were immigrants from China. Dad came to Malaysia at the age of 18 with nothing, and then built a business and was able to, at great sacrifice from both mom and dad, to send us to school and college in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in a kind of tin shack with a well in the backyard, and it wasn't until I think I was probably 8 or 9 or 10 before we first saw drinking water available on tap. And even then, even at that stage, the water was pretty brownish, and you had to sort of, do a whole lot of filtration before you could even use it. So that's the background.
And that's still the reality for a lot of people around the world.
For millions and millions of people around the world, sadly.
Billions. Perhaps. And how many of you were? How many kids in the family?
There were 10 of us, a big family. We could almost feel a football team, a soccer team, as you would call it.
Softball, baseball team.
And it was an amazing sacrifice for our parents to be able to send us 9 out of 10 kids to university overseas.
Amazing.
And really, Dave, those in a sense, I saw the power of a small business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think, and that's a very sort of understandable way of describing the power of a small business. This small business sent these kids off into life, right?
Yeah.
And you have, I'm just doing the math. You mentioned football team, right? Including your parents, it's 3 foursomes. Yeah. You could run a little tournament.
We could.
Football gets all the comparisons, right? I'm more of a golfer myself. That's true. So do you, growing up this is a question I ask almost all of my guests. And so growing up, without access to water and in a family you describe as poor, I assume you didn't have a lot of excess wealth to use to buy gifts, right? For other folks. I remember when I was younger than 8 or 9, I started getting an allowance. And one of the first things I remember is using that allowance to buy a birthday present for my mother.
All right.
Do you remember the first time that this doesn't have to be that you bought something, but do you remember your very first memory of being generous, of giving someone a gift, of giving someone to something?
Yeah, in Asia, we grew up in a very sharing culture. At school, in a playground, for instance, if we had any kind of snacks, we just share it. Similarly with drinks. So in a sense, we never thought of it as a gift. We thought more of it as a sharing with those, of our friends and people who don't have any. I saw certainly examples from my dad, particularly in terms of his giving. So even when, we were still poor, I can still picture my dad, donating baskets of food from the shop to people, particularly elderly who have needs and so on. So, that's a kind of culture we grew up in.
Very good. And did you have a faith-based background? Are you religious in any way? Did you grow up religious?
Yes, I grew up in a Taoist family. I was dedicated to the goddess of mercy and so on. But when I got into secondary schools and discovered science, I very quickly became an atheist, being a Darwinian adherent. And then when I came to this country, to the UK, I was already starting to search around, and in the end became a Christian, came through with some help from friends at school. So I have a Christian faith, and it's very much drives what I do.
And that's something you converted as an adult?
I converted as an adult just before university.
So growing up, you grew up Taoist?
Taoist, yeah.
And I think I heard you mention Goddess of Mercy?
Goddess of Mercy, yeah. One of the goddesses.
Nice.
And Malaysia is a predominantly Islamic country. So We lived probably 50 yards from the Hindu temple and 400 yards from the mosque. So
fairly different from the typical American upbringing. There's no
different.
My town did not have. We do have some Muslims in my town. I don't, and perhaps a Hindu or two. There's a college, and I think some of the professors might be
right.
Hindu. That's very interesting. I think you are the first. You're Christian now, but you're the first person who was raised Taoist that I've interviewed on the show. I think.
Okay.
Is there anything from and I'm the concept of conversion is something that's been, aside from the podcast, I find that very interesting, particularly when someone as an adult decides, someone who's studying the sciences no less, decides to take on a new faith practice. That's very, very interesting to me, especially since you just mentioned to me that you became an atheist because of Darwin, right? So can you talk, what is it about that draws you into that faith practice as you're simultaneously developing a practice based on reason and the scientific method?
I guess, in a sense, Darwinian kind of understanding kind of helps to give us a little bit of an idea of our place in the universe. But, the kind of materialistic answers really just didn't satisfy. And I was, in my heart, searching for something deeper. And because I came from a Taoist faith, I had seen the practice, I've been a practicing Taoist myself, and I've seen the Islamic faiths growing up. Hindu temple was fantastic. They love festivals, and us kids just would go and have food and curries, every time there was a festival. Through that journey, I think one of the things that came to me was really, I need to discover more of a purpose. And Christianity for me was almost the last thing I was looking for, because I was in a mission school for a number of years before coming to the UK. And the kind of religious practices just completely turned me off. It was just, I thought if that was Christianity, then it was just formulaic and traditional, and, it just didn't attract me at all. But when I came and read some of the writings of particularly people like C.S. Lewis. I don't know whether you know C.S. Lewis's work. Narnia, but with more Christianity.
Yeah, no, he did some very Christian, right? But the Narnia, Aslan is Jesus.
Yeah, I'm
sorry if that's a spoiler.
Great imagery. Great imagery there. So it was very much C.S. Lewis type writings that sort of made me rethink.
Very similar to myself. A lot of the traditional official aspects of religion, right? Going to sit in a pew while an old man talks to you about things. Sometimes sometimes in Latin, or in my case, in Hebrew or some ancient language, right? Okay. That stuff never and still is not interesting and useful to me. I wish, and I don't want to, I know I've seen that it does bring meaning to people, and I don't want to talk that's great. But I do consider myself Jewish, even though I don't like going to temple. I found, like you, in the writing, in some of the other traditions, in the food and the festivals and stuff, there's lots of other things that I find a lot of meaning in. And I do think some of those official things do, and mission schools, things of that nature, are actually sometimes turning people off, like you and me, when we are potential adherents. So very interesting. And I'm glad you were able to find a faith practice. It seems like it brings you quite a bit of joy. I can see the smile on your face as you talk.
I would say the two, when people ask me what motivates me, I would say one is obviously my background. When you grow up poor, you understand poverty. You don't just read about it, you've lived it. You understand how hard it is. And secondly, it's my Christian faith, and a faith that drives me not only to believe, but to act. And a lovely Jewish phrase I love is tikkun olam. I don't know whether you know the phrase.
Yes, we talk about it on the show often. Repair the world.
I think that is such a great way to summarize what I'm called to do. Tikkun olam.
It's very. It provides a lot of meaning for me to think about, and in some way, I think the idea that the world is broken and that I can, in some small way, repair it is a comforting thought.
Yeah.
The opposite, the idea that the world is perfect and I have to be perfect to keep up with it, is a anxiety-producing thought. And thank you for mentioning that. That is, Tikkun Olam comes up often on this.
Oh, really?
With our Jewish and non-Jewish guests as well. I think, and particularly, there are Jewish nonprofits. And if it's a Jewish nonprofit, they're definitely going to mention in the About Us section of the website is definitely going to mention Tikkun Olam, right?
Do you get Christians using Tikkun Olam?
Yeah, they certainly do. Yes.
Okay.
I think it's probably one of the better known Jewish phrases amongst non-Jews in the philanthropy sector. There are many things we say. It's a whole language.
Sure.
That one is a very important one. It does come up a lot, and I think it does have a lot of. I think it's similar. I think most faiths have a similar belief.
And the central tenet of the Jewish faith, the Shema. it's right. Just sums it up.
So we've talked a little bit about it already. You went to school, mission school, and then you went to school in the UK for biochemistry. What draws you there? What gets you into biochemistry?
Because I'm a failure. Mm-hmm. I failed to get into medical school. Okay. I didn't get the grades. Yeah. So it was a case of, what's the other course that is related? And biochemistry was a kind of new course. Genetics was fairly new, and the early days of the double helix and all that, kind of interesting. So I thought, okay, let's go for this, and that's how I ended up doing biochemistry, and loved it. I really enjoyed the biology side than the chemistry side. And after my undergraduate, decided to stay on, and courtesy of the British government, had a scholarship from them to do a PhD. And then after that, thinking I was going to be an academic or be a professor at some stage, stayed on and did 3 postdoctorate fellowships, again, courtesy of the British government. And here's a shout out for the British government, generosity towards a Malaysian citizen. I'm still a Malaysian citizen. Oh. No strings attached. They said, just on merit. So, and then when I left to start my first biotech company, the British government again turned up with a grant, which I didn't have to repay. I didn't have to become a British citizen. They just wanted to encourage me, to support me, to go and develop this new technology. So failed to get into medical school, failed to become a professor, bailed out to go and build a business, biotech business. So failure features a lot in my life.
Yes, might as well. Failed a couple times. This is a morning interview, and I failed a few times before it started. I had some failures over the weekend. I got some coming up probably this afternoon. And I think Unfunded List, a core idea behind what we do is the idea that failure shouldn't really be considered a negative, particularly when it comes to submitting grant proposals for funding. The vast majority, 99% of all proposals rejected. If that's the numbers, and if you consider failure as a statement about you, right? That means are we really saying 99% of all people are that's not. Phrase we use often here is we talk about rejection as a resource, right?
Right.
You wrote that proposal, you got a written document, there's something you can do moving forward with that document, right? Even though it's not being funded, work was still put into the project. You've still got an idea. There are next steps that can be taken instead of just saying, oh, well, we didn't throw the proposal away and try something different, right? Learning from these things and moving on from them can have tremendous outcome. Yeah. It also sounds to me like the British, not to get too political, British government made some investment in a Malaysian immigrant that paid off not just for the immigrant, but for the United Kingdom itself. This was a strong investment. Investments in education play out even when they're made for people who aren't citizens.
No, that is true.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
Not sure why anyone would have a problem with any of that.
Rinse and repeat, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, there is some, there's in both of our countries. I know there's some anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK and across Europe and here in America. And there are leaders that would foment that on the idea that any investment made in the stranger is coming away from your neighbor, from you. Yeah. We're taking it away from you and giving it to these immigrants who don't want to work. And that's it's just not an accurate portrayal of what's happening.
Yeah, I think on the immigration and work side, I think it's slightly different to funding research. The US government has been very generous. If you go to NIH, a lot of foreign scientists there funded by NIH. So I think both Europe and the US have been very generous to us scientists.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's smart. Governments want to see science advance.
Yeah.
It just sort of works out well for everybody. And if you think about it from the point, obviously that was someone's tax dollars, right? That's the origin of that wealth, right? And if you think about it like, oh, I'm being taxed so other people can, if that's how you think about everything, you're going to have a negative view on everything. Yeah. And it's just a bad place to start from it.
Yeah, and I don't know whether any study's been done, Dave, but it'd be very interesting to track the number of foreign students who have been funded, say, at NIH, who then went on to start biotech companies and pharma companies in the United States.
You can, beyond just the government, you can also look at like Harvard that has allowed
universities and so on.
Any school that's providing this education. We're providing education to people who want to pursue it and who will use it to better the world, for tikkun olam, right? And that benefits everybody, not just the person that's receiving it. And then we do these in any good grant program, whether it's funding scholarships for education or grants to nonprofits or anything, is doing so in a way that's going to make the world repaired, not just kickbacks for people, right? Taking your tax dollars and giving it to this other, like that's not how the grant makers are thinking about it, really, and it's not really how these programs succeed.
Well, I think it'd be very interesting just to see. I mean, if we just look at the founders and the CEOs of Google, Microsoft now, right, and something and Nvidia. I mean, they've been educated in the US, and then they went off and built these amazing companies. Look at the amazing impact they've had, both on the economy and in terms of advancing technology in the country. So I'm a beneficiary of the generosity of the British government. So
So can you explain to me sheep monoclonal antibodies?
Yes,
I think you can. You were the best person in the world to explain it to me, right?
Well, the people that developed mouse monoclonal antibodies got the Nobel Prize.
Okay.
They were at Cambridge, but we found that really the sheep antibodies were better than the mouse antibodies. So one day I just said to my professor, why don't we try and make sheep monoclonal antibodies? And he says, no, don't waste your time. Can't be done. So we went on and made up some time in the evening and just went and experimented. And essentially what it is immortalizing amazing antibody cells from sheep, taking them out from the sheep and immortalizing them so that we can grow them forever. It's conferring eternal life, Dave, on these sheep cells. So you can produce you can vaccinate a sheep to anything you like, right? To a virus, to a drug, and you identify the one cell that gives you this amazing antibody. You take it out from the sheep, it will last for maybe 14 days. Then you've lost that quality cell. But if you can immortalize it and make it live forever, you can then grow it in a vat, in a fermenter forever. And when you don't need it, you put it down in liquid nitrogen in the freezer. Then when you need it again, 5 years later, you take it out again and you can grow it up again.
Wow.
That's the sheep monoclonal antibody technology. And we then licensed it. And these superior antibodies gives you faster test time. So from half an hour down to 5 minutes, give you better sensitivity. They can detect lower concentrations of different hormones or proteins that are of interest, and cheaper. So if you go for a blood test in any of your with any of the insurance company, if you go for a thyroid function test, maybe 50-60% of the time will be a sheep monoclonal antibody.
Really?
If you go for a test for your heart proteins, very likely to be a sheep monoclonal. Wow. If you go for a test for vitamin D, it's most likely over 90% will be a sheep monoclonal antibody.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I had, like a lot of people during the pandemic, my vitamin D levels got low.
Yeah.
And I remember I was taking the big vitamin D pills
right.
I definitely got my blood tested a few times. So thank you very much. That's awesome. And you say the inventor of the mouse monoclonal antibody won the Nobel Prize?
Yep.
Did you
Colonel Milstein.
Were you recognized in any way?
No.
The
We
world
couldn't patent anything.
You and the president, both very deserving of this award. And then they just don't want to give it to you. It's all politics, I say.
No, we decided just to build a business around it and see if we could,
And that business ended up being successful and also contributing to the health of people all over the world.
Yeah, to this day, one of my great joys when I go to any country is to find a hospital with a big machine, with a big analyzer in the lab, and go and lift the hood and see if there are any of our antibodies in there.
Yeah, they are. That is interesting to think about. They're using your invention all over the world, right? Every hospital in the world potentially.
Yeah, so it's in Abbott's machine, Boehringer, Johnson & Johnson, Roche.
Wow. And so this is your business. You make money off of selling this to them, or
we license it to them, and that's what gave me my first capital. Because when I started my business and so on, I didn't have parental support because my parents didn't have that kind of money. So it was really being very fortunate time to have that technology is what gave me the capital to do the kind of things I'm doing now.
Very cool. So I'm 44 years old myself. And I read there's several bios of you out there and stories about you and everything. And I read several times that you were set to retire at 45. I assume I'll be retired. I mean, I got a chance I can retire next year. Hard for me to think, for me to think about retiring, and even if I could, what would I do? I have to do something all day, right? I'm the most capable and knowledgeable and connected as I've ever been. To stop working now would be money.
Dave, if you retire, you'll be busier than when you are working. I can guarantee you that. I'm busier now than when I was working.
So but you could have found a beach somewhere, right?
Could have.
Or you could be playing golf.
Golf.
I know a bunch of retired guys that's their new job now is actually some of them right behind you.
I know, I can see them behind you. My wife plays golf once a week, and she would love me to go and join her, but
I live next to the course, so
I'm too busy.
You can see them going by. It takes up a ton of time, so that's why a lot of guys, when they retire from their business or whatever, really will sort of dive into it. I know guys who are out there every single morning, golf all day, whatever. I also remember right before I founded Unfunded List, I went on a trip to Israel with a bunch of other global entrepreneurs. I was working for an exchange program at the time. Right. And when we were in Israel, they brought in a lot of speakers for us, including Shimon Peres, was a really cool person to hear from, someone who I had admired quite a bit. And he runs a center for peace. And we got to see his center and hear him talk to us. And at the time, he was like 96 or 90. He's passed away now, but he was very advanced age and still working every day. And that's what someone said. Someone asked him about that. How is it that you're still working all day every day? And he said, I don't. What am I going to do? I'm going to walk on the beach with a dog and just be bored in tears. I have the ability to work. God put me on earth to do Tikkun Olam, and I'm going to do it until I can't anymore. And that was the very meaning, especially when your work has meaning. I think you're going to feel that way. People who can't wait to retire from work are people who hate their jobs.
Yeah. If you enjoy what you're doing, it's not work.
Mm-hmm. So so instead of retiring, you sort of make the transition from the lab to investment work. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Well, was that an active decision you made? I'm going to stop inventing things. I'm going to start investing in other inventions.
It was intentional. I could have gone on and gotten other post-doctorate fellowships and wait my time to be a professor. But, so I said goodbye to academia. That was my first career. And I started my second career in the biotech world and started by building a business in diagnostics. But I realized, very early on, I was a lousy CEO, and I didn't enjoy the responsibility of, lots and lots of mortgages on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy making the same product every week. I like doing new things.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough 7-8 years later, after I started my first company, to sell it and then use that capital to start investing in other businesses, other biotech businesses. And then in the end, running a biotech VC fund, which is a lot more fun. Just working with really smart people is a lot of fun, but not having the day-to-day responsibility of running the operation. So that was really my second career.
I find I've said it before, I'm technically the executive director of Unfunded List. I'm also the founder. And I've said before, I'm a very good founder and I am a bad executive director. And very much for me, I used to work in grants and I was writing the same proposal for the same organization to different funders constantly. Same program I'm describing constantly. Now I get to read proposals from last year. I read proposals from 200 different projects in 70 different countries, right? And for me, that is just so much more interesting and engaging than before this. I've been doing this for 11 years, but I was never at any nonprofit for more than 18 months before that, just because it's the one, they can't pay you and they have no, there's lots of issues in the nonprofit sector, but the monotony of it. And once I finally found my niche here where I'm allowed to work with lots of different things. So I think that's something that we have in common there. There was a story that I've heard you describe it on another podcast, and I've read it in a few articles about you. And it's similar to some other stories I've heard from people when they sort of describe their journey into social impact work. Will be as broad as possible, right? And this is, I went on a trip somewhere, and I was given a tour of an NGO, and it affected me thusly. And then I changed my entire worldview based off of this one interaction at this one NGO.
Didn't change my worldview, but changed my career. I was at a stage of starting a second VC fund in biotech when I went for the first time to Africa, and it was a trip to South Africa.
Okay.
And it was a visit with one of the large NGOs to the township or the slum just outside Cape Town called Khayelitsha, 1 million people in that big township. And, well-meaning, well-intentioned people, but helping people to make furniture by hand, shoes, clothes, trinkets by hand. And they were poor quality. And what I said to them was really, why don't you have a factory, right, with proper machinery so that these folks can make things that are of quality? Because when we buy these products out of pity, it doesn't confer dignity on the people that are making them, and how many more trinkets can we buy out of pity? And they said to me, and I was willing to fund a factory. I wasn't willing to sort of write another check, because writing another check wasn't going to make any difference. They said to me, we don't know how to run a business. We don't know how to run a factory. And that really was, the Damascus Road moment for me. Having come from Southeast Asia, that has not seen any aid, has not seen any philanthropy, not seen any microfinance in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And yet the tiger economies have all been transformed through enterprise. I just thought, Africa's not going to be any different. No country in our history has ever been transformed through aid. So that was the
certainly no.
Yeah, that was the beginning of me being challenged to not raise a second VC fund in biotech, but to see if I could use my venture capital background to intentionally build businesses amongst the poor to tackle issues of poverty and issues of the environment. And 26 years ago, there was no terminology, so I call it social venture capital. And I still prefer the phrase to impact investing, because impact investing becomes so broad now. Everybody is.
I roll my eyes, sort of react like an instant reaction every time I hear impact investing.
Yeah,
I've been to, and you're right. This is all newer. I think if you go back 30 or 40 years, let's go back clean 40 years, none of this is part of the conversation, right? There's philanthropy and investment are very, very separate buckets. They don't talk to each other. And certainly we would never use philanthropy to build a factory.
Yeah.
And I think, in fact, the stuff is all still so new that we haven't settled on common language.
Correct.
You hear social enterprise a lot. One of our original board members was a student at George Washington University in DC, which is one of the first schools to have a social enterprise program. And it was he and some other students, undergraduate students, where we're interested in social enterprise. Your business classes don't offer anything on this. There's no course when it comes to this. And there's a student-led effort to sort of start that. And now you see that campuses across the country, and I think in the UK as well, have people now actually study and get degrees in this stuff. And this is very new since I was born.
Yeah.
Very, very new compared to investment or even philanthropy, or certainly compared to like older fields like religion or education, right? Very, very young, decades old field that obviously isn't going to have its like best practices sorted out, or it's not going to have those traditions and those official things that bored us so much in church, right?
Yeah.
It's all still very new to the point where we don't even have the language on it.
Yeah,
I find that very interesting. And you've probably played. So you don't like impact investing? You're not an impact investor?
Not really.
But what are you? You're a venture capitalist?
If we have to describe ourselves, probably a social venture capitalist.
A social venture capitalist.
Or social impact investor.
And is that because, so fundamentally, does that mean double bottom line?
Triple bottom line, quadruple bottom line. Yeah.
Quadruple.
People, planet, profit, and purpose.
So just to go into the basic, it's one of my least favorite phrases, double bottom line or triple bottom line. I guess I like it even less. Because
quadruple that.
Just the basic geometry, Kim, right? Bottom is the bottom. You can't have more than one bottom.
Yeah.
Right? And profit motive is so strong that I feel like it is going to push out some of those other lines.
Where we come from is we start with the problem, right? What's the problem? Instead of doing traditional charity, which is good, but doesn't really change anything long term, can we design an enterprise solution? So the intentionality and is a purpose is already baked in. It's not an afterthought,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the intentionality is not to have a Silicon Valley return. It is how can we build a business that is sustainable, that confers dignity on the people, provide real employment, and that's scalable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all baked in.
There's a Henry Ford quote. I don't normally like to quote Henry Ford, not one of my favorites. But he said something like I think it was him, that the modern industrialist needs to sell the highest quality product for the lowest possible price while paying the highest possible wages, something along those lines. And so that's a quote. That quote's over 100 years old.
Yeah.
So is that the same thing?
Kind of, except for the intentionality. So we are intentionally building businesses in the slums, in rural Africa.
There was really no social impact.
Yeah, for him, the social impact would be job creation, right? And that has a value.
Sure, but you're looking for social impact beyond just the economic outcomes.
It's the intentionality of addressing a problem.
Yeah.
Right. It could be human trafficking. It could be prisoners, reintegration back into society. These are all enterprises that we intentionally built to address some of these kinds of issues.
So going on to aid versus charity, point you've made today and in some other writings, you point to the fact that a lot of aid has gone into Africa, trillions of dollars.
Six Marshall Plans worth.
Yes. Africa is a very large continent, I would point out, with a lot of people and many different countries.
Yes.
And in general, it is larger than the average, particularly the average American understands. I think that a lot of us don't really fully understand the scope and size of the continent. I would point out that aid has accomplished, their infant mortality rates and disease rates and lots of things have improved as a result of that aid. Particularly, and the one I point to most common and the one that was most damaged by the USAID cuts is infant mortality and maternal health. I mean, there were areas in particular like South Sudan and Sudan where the infant mortality rate was abysmal, and because of mostly American investment, became babies were being born healthy. And now that we've made those cuts, we're going to go back to abysmal rates.
Yeah.
Fairly direct evidence that the aid was helpful in keeping those babies alive.
Aid and philanthropy will always be needed, especially in humanitarian crises. We need aid and philanthropy to be there. And there's also certain sectors that are very difficult for business. Yep. Health is one of them. education.
Any kind of last mile thing for business is tough. It's harder to make money there.
Exactly. And business can only start in countries that have a measure of stability, right? And there need to be some basic political, economic stability. Otherwise, you can't start the businesses. So
same with philanthropy. You'll see that the grants and the aid the countries that don't have functioning governments aren't receiving
difficult
aid grants.
Yeah. No, we so we work with NGOs, we work with philanthropy, family offices. We say carry on doing all this good stuff, right? But if you really want to see long-term change and transformation, I think you've got to think enterprise and, do an allocation of your philanthropic dollars. And that's how we've sort of been building this network called the Transformational Business Network for both the DFIs, the family offices, and private individuals like me to make an allocation from our philanthropic giving to intentionally invest in local entrepreneurs to help them build and scale their businesses.
So yeah, I mean, the encounter to the all the aid that's flowed in there, at the same time there was investment that's flowing in. Couldn't we make the same argument despite hundreds of billions, perhaps trillions of investment dollars going into Africa?
A lot of money in terms of private investment has gone in, but it's to the extractive sector. Unfortunately,
the farther back you go in history, the more it's extremely extractive. Yeah,
extractive. So that's where the West has gone into Africa, right? For its resources.
Aid and philanthropy needs to become a little bit more sustainable in its thinking, and business and investment needs to get a little bit more social and problem solving in its thinking.
Yeah, and just to move away from the extractive, build the infrastructure. We don't have train lines to get goods to ports.
Yeah,
we still in many of our countries don't have decent roads. The money that has gone in previously have all been into the extractive industry. Not much in the infrastructure, except in recent years the Chinese have come and built train lines and roads. Then virtually nothing in the small, medium-sized sector, right? And that is the sector, that's the backbone of all our developed economy. And that's the missing middle that the economists talk about. That's missing in all the underdeveloped countries. We have lots of micro businesses, but very few SMEs.
And I think in general, just thinking about communities in the U.S., healthy nonprofits that are able to serve their communities well, do tend to be in communities that have small businesses, that have a small business, that have a functioning economy. Yeah. I think some of the best philanthropies in the U.S. are sort of place-based, city-based family foundations, where the family made their money from a business that's in the town, right? Yeah. And it's sort of contributing, and everything's working together in harmony like that. Yeah. And I think that's it's easier to do something on a small scale like that, but I do think that is the model that can work on a large scale. And so you met one thing. So you are, I believe, I've been doing the podcast for a while, but I do think you are my first Southeast Asian guest. And you mentioned.
I'm honored. You should get a few more of us on.
I would love to. I mean, we, Unfunded List is a global program. We will read proposals from anywhere. We've never received one from Malaysia, unfortunately. Let me think, in Vietnam, South Korea. We had one from Taiwan once. We had several from India. We had one from Cambodia once. I mentioned we had a New Zealand program, so we've got you surrounded. And eventually we'll get, we've got there's only like 20 countries left that we have yet to receive a proposal from, and Malaysia is one of those. So maybe if you know somebody who's writing grant proposals over there, please have them send one over to us. But yeah, I mean, it's about as far away from me physically as you can get. I've never worked in that region or whatever. It's sort of a network issue. But I think a lot of the folks who are listening and who are a part of the Unfunded List network might know less about Malaysia and that part of the world. So it's great to have you on here. You mentioned the Asian tigers earlier. What is that? What are the Asian? You're not talking about animals, right? We're not
talking about animals. So 55 years ago, the GDP of Ghana and Kenya was higher than the GDP of Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, South Korea. Yeah, Thailand.
That's not true anymore?
So these are the tiger economies of Asia. And the way that these countries have transformed themselves, it was because of enterprise. So in the 50s and 60s, the Japanese offloaded their low-tech businesses, SMEs, into these countries. One, they created jobs for our people. Two, they trained and upskilled our people. And three, they stimulated a generation of local entrepreneurs who, after 5-10 years of training, said, thank you very much for the training. I'm going down the road to either be your supplier initially, and then eventually I'm going to be your competitor. So, and that's how these tiger economies have transformed their economies. And that's only 50, 55 years ago. And without aid, without aid.
South Korea and Taiwan have certainly been recipients of aid.
They have had some aid, but not in the early days.
Sure.
It's enterprise driven.
And is there not, I mean, I do think, I mean, in terms of building an economy, enterprise is what can do it. Even if Karl Marx were here, he would agree. He would, I mean, he would. You have to, you know, and actually, I think he'd agree with a lot of what we're saying, not to label us communists, but that there is certainly, like you say, there's a place for aid. I agree. I similarly would say there's definitely a place for enterprise. We can't have a planet without businesses selling us things and doing all of this stuff. But do you think enterprise alone can bring a poor country into being a rich country like today?
No, I think it needs you know poverty is a multifaceted problem. You can't tackle it with one instrument, so you need everything. But the long-term objective has to be that a country is prosperous enough to be able to provide good quality education for its citizens, to be able to provide clean drinking water, to be able to provide decent health and social care for its citizens. You know, so the economy of a country has got to get to that kind of level before it can do that for its citizens. I think not many countries have done that, but a country like, the Scandinavian countries, I think it got pretty close. You get really good quality education there, good quality healthcare, quality social care. It's because the economy is strong enough to be able to provide that. So how to get there, I suppose, is really the challenge that we face in many of our countries. And even in Malaysia, we're still on that journey. We're still on that path.
Should that be the focus of aid then, sort of stabilizing economies so that enterprise can do its work?
I think philanthropy and aid can do a number of things, and certainly to help stabilize economies, stabilize the politics. You know, would it be help if we didn't have all these civil wars, every few years in some of these countries? That would really help. That would encourage investors to come, right?
Yes.
Certainly at that level. I think, where we've worked with philanthropic organizations and families is they will usually come in to provide first loss, on a new project, or to provide technical assistance grants for a new innovative crop that, somebody wants to grow. And many of our projects, I would say, started with a family office saying, here's a grant, go and try this, go and develop something new. Go and develop a new business model.
Certainly. So moving on to some of the ventures you're involved with now, the CARE project, Conservation and Rural Enterprise. Are you the founder of that?
Yeah.
What is it?
What is it?
And what are you trying to prove by building it?
So after my Damascus Road moment in South Africa, Cape Town, I decided to change my career to social venture capital investing. And long story, I ended up in the poorest province in the country to decide to build a safari game park. Went on the ground. It took me 2 years, Dave, to learn about the country. And went to the development corporations who gave me a list of failed projects funded by the EU, World Bank, et cetera, et cetera. And over those 2 years, I saw more empty chicken sheds, empty fish farms, empty greenhouses, and I saw really where all the waste has gone. So long story, in the end, we decided to, in a district of 85% unemployment, in rural South Africa, what kind of enterprise can you really build that will be sustainable, that could be profitable and grow to scale? And we decided a safari game park. So I bought 40,000 acres of degraded farmland, fenced 75 kilometers of elephant-proof fencing, brought in big animals for the first time in 150 years, built a 5-star lodge hotel there with a staff village, not knowing a number of questions. One, can you restore badly degraded farmland? 2, when you transport these animals into this area that hadn't been game for 150 years, are they going to be happy to breed? 3, can you intentionally hire local people who haven't got the literacy rates and upskill them to serve 5-star international guests? Those are all questions I had no answers for, but I thought, hey, I've decided not to write a philanthropic check. Let's just go and make this investment. If we lose money, we lose money. We're going to give it away anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the beginning. And that was a good bit of learning. And we saw that animals can breed there, and they are very happy there. We're doing conservation for 4 species. And then 3 years ago, we then turned our attention to the land itself, badly degraded. And over a 2-year period, we planted 30 million plants, indigenous plants, onto 12,000 acres to green the land, to restore the land. And what I've learned from that is, 1, the environment is not the problem. Humans are the problem. If we don't change human behavior, if we don't solve the human problems of poverty and hunger, you will not be able to tackle the environmental problem. So, and therefore you cannot tackle this whole environmental issue in a silo. Got to look at it, holistically. And that's what the CARE project is about. It's about conservation and rural enterprise. So the next project that we did was in Uganda, in a forest called Budungo. It's an 800 square kilometer forest. It's home to 600 chimpanzees, but it's almost 50% degraded. And on the margins, there's just been deforestation. And that's been driven by poverty. People in the community are so poor, they're chopping trees to sell charcoal to feed their families. Mm-hmm. You can't stop that. You can't judge them for doing that, right? Unless you provide alternative livelihoods. Mm-hmm. So we've gone in not only to build a luxury lodge, which we've done, and we've opened that last month. And in the village, I bought 5.5 acres of land to put 3 factories, hoping between these 3 or 4 enterprises, we can create about 150 new jobs. I got Belmont University from Nashville to do a socioeconomic survey. 80% of our people borrow money. Average income per family is $300 US per year. So it's less than $1 a day, right? With that kind of poverty, there's no way you can protect your forest and protect the chimpanzees. You have to address the hunger. You have to address the human problem, the human need. And then you have a chance of tackling the environmental issue. So that's what the whole CARE project is about, that we should not just raise money to save the elephant, save the rhino. When there's a baby.
Donate. You mentioned $1 a day. There are programs that literally encourage you to donate $1 a day, sort of just directly paying that. That's really not going to get it. Like, just giving those people $1 a day is not ever going to. It's not going to do anything for the trees. It's not going to do anything for the chimps. It's just sort of going to churn and keep things the same.
Yeah. We need to give these people real livelihoods, right? These jobs, to give them the dignity of a job, the dignity of earning a wage, the dignity of putting food on the table. Mm-hmm. That's what we want, And when I teach, I just say, look, the poor just want your lifestyle. They want what you have.
I have so in terms of how does CARE choose the projects it works on?
We've analyzed a number of vulnerable forests in Africa. So we're tackling them one at a time. You have to work with the local communities. You've got to understand them and know what it is that they want in job-wise, where they're at.
If let's say there's a local practitioner near a forest in Africa, and he's running a program or she's running a program, to try to protect the forest. And they've got a local CSO. It's tragically underfunded, like most African nonprofits.
Yeah.
They learn about the CARE program and some of the great work you've done in some other areas, and they think it's a good fit for them and their forest and their work. Is there a way for that person to
connect with us?
Just reach out and talk to you about their
project? Reach out. Yeah, because ultimately, Dave, we are investing in people. It's people. You got to have a champion with a passion who's already there doing some, basic stuff and whatever. And we can come behind them with capital and partner them to do things at scale.
When they reach out to you, what advice would you give to them to increase their chances of getting a response? I mean, I talk to a lot of folks who are reaching out to people like yourself all the time. And the most common thing that happens when you do that is radio silence, right?
Well, what we always ask for is just a 2-page executive summary.
You have an official process? Like are they supposed to send you an LOI or something like that?
No, just an executive summary.
Okay.
And with that, what we then do is we're going to send it into the network. I mean, the TBN network, there are about 4,000 or 5,000 of us in the network. Okay, in different countries, in different industry sectors. So it depends on what kind of sectors they're in. We're going to point them and connect them. So the whole TBN thing is that we're sector neutral, we're sector agnostic. We're backing entrepreneurs. Find us some talented entrepreneurs who have a passion for building a small business that tackles a social or environmental issue. Mm-hmm. That's what we are. And we will come alongside them, help them to build a management team, put in real capital to help them to grow to scale and sustainability.
And how many people do you hear from a year?
Loads. So there is a program.
There are a lot of people like that. There's
a program in East Africa. They select about 100 business plans a year, 50 every 6 months, mentor them for 6 months. They get their different modules built in. They build, the first module is character. Really, really important. If we don't get that character piece right, nothing works. And then we get their legals and their accounting, their business strategy sorted out, at the end of which there's a pitch session, and then we bring our funds, we bring our investors, and maybe 30-40% of them will get funded from that.
It's a very interesting project. Very good. You are also involved in what I would call some more traditional grant making. You're on the board we were talking earlier about the Templeton Foundation.
Yeah.
What do you do as a board member there? And what does the Templeton Foundation focus on?
The Templeton Foundation was seeded by Sir John Templeton from the Templeton Mutual Funds. When he died, when he sold his business, he created 3 foundations. His interests were in 3 areas. One is the intersection of science and religion. Sir John was very interested in the origins of life. What's our place in the universe? And so we found fundamental science. The Black Hole Initiative, for instance, Harvard, is funded by us. A lot of the early epigenetic stuff was funded by Templeton. There's a high-risk kind of research that nobody wants to fund. That's us. The other area he's very interested in was human flourishing. So we fund a lot of areas in character formation, forgiveness, peacemaking, character formation. We fund a lot of the summer schools, Christian summer schools, Jewish summer schools, Muslim summer schools for character formation. And the third area is individual freedom and free markets. Mm-hmm. He was a free marketeer. So that's also an area of interest. So those are 3 areas that we fund.
And this is these are just philanthropic grants.
Philanthropic grants.
Foundation.
Yeah.
And there are grant proposals involved?
Thousands and thousands.
How many? Do you know exactly how many you received last year?
Previous year was 3,000. This year was 6,000. Yeah, more than 6,000. Yeah.
So you doubled in a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing that from a lot of other people who work on that side of things. The foundation in DC told me they got in 2025 they got 6 times the number of applicants from 2024.
I think the private philanthropies are having to pick up the slack. from the cutbacks.
You think it's primarily from cuts?
I think so. The other reason might be AI.
Yeah, that's
easier. It's just easier to put grant proposals together now.
I think I'm hearing from a lot of philanthropists that actually want to take it off of the cuts and put it more on AI. I think that's going to be different depending on which foundation we're talking about. I think some of them are very clearly seeing a lot more applicants because people can apply easier because you can now write a proposal faster.
Yeah.
In theory, using AI.
Yeah.
I actually think if you're using AI properly, write a grant proposal will actually take you longer because you've now got this extra tool. Like as a professional grant writer, like I'm thinking about how I'm going to add in a tool to my process. I'm not going to use it to replace parts of my process. I'm going to add in. And generally, I do think, I could just punch the questions in to Claude, right, and say answer these questions, right? I don't think that proposal is going to get funded. I think the one that's going to get funded is the one where I'm writing up new prompts, where I'm showing my drafts to the AI and incorporating notes and actually making it take longer for me. But the thing lots of people on the philanthropy side of things have a concern for AI and that it's causing an inundation. The third thing that I would say is contributing to more proposals coming in is income inequality, which is increasing the amount of need and decreasing the amount. Nonprofits used to be easier for them to sustain themselves off of smaller donations from the missing middle, right? Now that they're missing, right, they can't necessarily donate to these nonprofits. So I think you've got those three factors increasing the number of people. Like they're like, oh, I need to get grants, right? And I've seen some data that is very interesting. So this is from Impala, which is a website that does AI analysis of the whole grant sector, right? And if they look at tax returns from grant makers and received grants and stuff, and they found that last year, 2025 or 2024, there were more grants a higher percentage of grants to new organizations than ever before, which is actually contradictory to what I would have thought, right? We're getting all of these applications in, right? Maybe I would have thought that the foundations would be like, well, we can't read all these. Let's just fund what we've been funding. That'll be the easiest thing. We already know them. Let's do this. But they are identifying and finding new things, which is both encouraging and also concerning that we need to be funding so many new nonprofits here in 2026. So talk to me about the process of as a board member, how are you involved? You don't read 3,000 or 6,000 applications.
No.
In fact, no individual reads 6,000.
No, so that's all done at the office, and they sift through, and it's very easy to see which grants fit us and which don't. And so fairly easy to sort of say this just wouldn't work for us. Mm-hmm. And then the grant officers then have to do the hard work of saying, okay, which ones are we going to take forward to the trustees? And then the trustees then have to read the grants and to read the responses from external reviewers as well, and sometimes it goes out for review, a couple of cycles as well. Mm-hmm. So it is a tough process.
I read a couple hundred proposals a year, right. And the ones I read, most of them have been rejected already by foundations.
Right.
And even though that's true, I would say that none of the proposals I read are bad. The work to write and submit a grant proposal it's a heavy lift, and people don't do that idly. If they do it, it's because they are passionate and care about an issue, and they have a real thing. So it seems to me that that's a very different. Like if you're reading a batch of proposals that were already submitted, so I got to expect that there's some value in them there, just from my own experience. I've read 1,500 unfunded proposals in the last 10 years. And I can count on one hand the number that I think were bad proposals that shouldn't have been funded. So you're reading not only that, but they've been shortlisted. So they've been determined to be a fit for the work you're trying to do. Yeah. And the professional program officers you've hired at the foundation have endorsed them and said these are good proposals. And then you have to make cuts from that batch.
Yeah, we occasionally
sounds very difficult.
We occasionally say no.
Yeah. Well, how do you have to?
Well, sometimes.
What does that work like? That when you get that batch of proposals, you'd love to just fund everything in the batch, right? Because they're going to be all great programs.
Absolutely, but we also have to be good stewards, of Sir John's money, and And we have very capable people on the board. We have biologists, we have quantum physicists, so who know the field. And so it's, it still has to pass through the trustees.
Yes, very interesting. One of the things I've been thinking about lately, I don't want to see foundations like Templeton become bloated with staff. If you have 6 times the proposals, it seems to me or twice the proposals, that means you've increased the amount of work that needs to be done. What are your thoughts on that? Should foundations be staffing up in order to read? Well, how are they going to make up? How are they going to just read faster then? Like, what do we?
I think we may have to use AI a bit more to help
especially for the short list. You're right. Yep. Often in the beginning, right? Yep. It's just we only
it's the top of the funnel. It's the top of the funnel that we have to tackle.
Yeah, and I do think there's a role here for grant seekers. Like, yes, your federal, you lost your federal funding, you have a gap, you want to serve your communities. That doesn't mean you should apply to every single grant maker that exists, or that's a value. Like, you should be very thoughtful about where you apply and spend the time to make sure you're a fit and build some relationship with these grant makers before taking the time to write up these applications and entering the full process.
So out of the 3 Templeton foundations, only one will solicit grant applications in our offline portal.
Okay.
The other 2, are self-generated. We know what areas we want to fund. We're going to find experts in those areas. It's more manageable. So I hope we don't get to the stage where all our grants are internally generated.
Understandable, like that workflow wise, it's understandable why you'd want to be generating it out that way.
Correct. But we miss out. We will miss out on the the outlier.
Are you going to do 6,000 site visits and like fully, like you can't do that either.
You can't do that.
So I think there's, again, it's a young field. It's still figuring it out. Grant seekers really do need to, and I personally think in 2026, you should think long and hard before any kind of cold submission. Any kind of cold, even if they are accepting proposals, you should at least try to talk to them or learn a little bit about them and their priorities before applying there. And I do think it may not always be apparent because we can't all talk to the grant maker. We don't all have a podcast where we get to interview all of them. So for a lot of these folks who are seeking grants, they've never spoken to a grant maker. They never get the chance to hear from them, right? They just sort of look like websites and portals, and they all they know is they need funding and they're trying to get out there. And I'm here telling them they need to build relationships with people that are fundamentally inaccessible to them. So I do think there still needs to be a lot of thoughtful work that's done in both and I think this is probably true for investment as well. Investors have to find who they're going to fund as well. One of the things, a lot of the people running great programs with great passion and great ideas are a little awkward and introverted and not necessarily well suited to that part of it. I think that's why you have to have a board of people who can make these connections and do this research and move these things forward for you. And you also just have to be real thoughtful about that. Just one of the things I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the amount of funding that was cut in this administration exceeds the amount of money that private philanthropy could dole out. Even if all the foundations increased their payouts from 5% to 100%, it would still be less than the amount that was cut. So how do we, as the philanthropy sector, deal with that and prioritize our choices there when we know we can't fully replace what's been cut? How do we? You're a grant maker at Templeton or a similar size foundation, and your life was pretty straightforward. You were getting sort of the same applicants every year. You knew what you funded. Things were moving along. Now, one thing that we should note is private foundations have made a lot of money. Their endowments have increased quite a bit.
And therefore we have to give out more.
Which means you do have to give out more. So that helps.
Yes.
And the endowments are increasing. The stock market's been just crazy. Continuing to do its thing despite seem to. One ththing I know, right? Money makes money. I don't necessarily make money, but money makes money always, right? So I know that's a big question, but like, how does philanthropy wrestle with this? We're getting more applications. We have more money to give out. The government's not necessarily meeting its obligations in the ways that it used to. Or what is a humble private foundation person to do?
I can't speak for philanthropy in general, Templeton is slightly unusual in that we largely fund research. So this is so we don't fund humanitarian activities. Because Sir John said there are already enough charities doing all that. I want you to fund things that nobody wants to fund. Go study forgiveness. Go study peacemaking. How do we make peace so that enterprise can establish itself and
that's a big one.
Society can thrive and so on. Go discover what the black hole's all about. So,
do you think philanthropy should continue to focus on the underfunded areas, the areas that aren't going to?
We have no choice. That's in our charter. So we cannot fund active projects. We can fund capacity building. We can fund research. Right. So we're slightly unusual. So I can't speak generally for others. So in our specific area, the way that we'll go about it is maybe to do more internal funded projects, programs, bigger ticket sizes, and then also to identify centers of excellence in different fields and then give them a large budget for them to manage and then for them to sub-grant or whatever. So that will be our way, I think, of managing this challenge going forward. You're right. The endowment has gone up. We have to give out more, but we don't want to increase the number of staff. That's also very clear.
Philanthropy work is work. Reading a lot of proposals, deciding programs, and giving the grants out requires people. Someone has to. There are foundations with no staff, but if you're like a large place giving a large number of grants, reading that many proposals is going to need them. Some of them are going to have to consider getting big. If the work is going to increase at this rate, they're going to have to consider getting bigger. And I think no one really wants a bloated philanthropy sector. So that's something I'm paying attention to.
We are very clear about that. So we are very, very lean. In the Bahamas, where the other two foundations sit, I don't think there are more than 20 staff there between the two of them. I think that there will be challenges, but I think finding centers of excellence, doing larger ticket size grants, and then maybe going beyond 3-year to maybe 5-year grants would also help. And it's actually better for the grantees. Right?
How much do you pay attention to cuts that have been made, and does that help with the request? So, like, if a potential grantee is saying, "We had this program ready to go, Elon Musk clawed back my funding, though. Will you give us the grant so we can do the exact same project?" Is that something that's interesting to you? Just replacing government funding that was lost?
I'm not sure. I think probably depends on the field. If we're already up to our budget this year, and the answer is definitely a no. Maybe come back to us next year. I think it's all down to our own strategic interests and also, the quality of grantee.
So for those folks who have lost their federal funding they're pivoting to private philanthropy, what is your advice for them?
Keep trying.
That's good. That is good. That is good advice. You will not succeed if you don't do that.
Keep knocking on the door. We were talking about failure earlier on. Failure is not when you get knocked down. Failure is when you fail to get up again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep trying.
This has been a very interesting conversation. Enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate the work you're doing. We did read a proposal submitted to Templeton Foundation like 6 or 7 years ago. It was from the one and only proposal that we've ever read from the Bahamas. I remember it was a group in the Bahamas trying to do some work in the port. It's fun for me to be able to talk to you there, learn about care, learn about everything else. We are getting in here to the end of the interview. Thank you very much to those of you who've been listening this entire time. I hope you've enjoyed talking with Dr. Kim and I. When you leave this interview, what's the most exciting thing you've got on your to-do list?
Much the same, I think, Dave. It's how do we catalyze more capital, patient capital, for local entrepreneurs to build and scale their businesses and use their businesses to tackle different social issues. So
that's like the meta of what you're working on. It's the end of the day. You're in UK, right?
Yeah.
So it's later in the day. Is there anything? What did you do earlier today? What was on your? I'm just trying. What's a general day like? What kind of stuff are you doing day to day?
Every day is different because every day is different. One minute I could be talking to the university where I'm a pro-chancellor with some of their spin-out companies. How we're going to help them to grow. Next minute we're talking about a new fund being set up in Kenya. I've got a call after this with call center in Changi prison in Singapore where we employ 80 men and 100 women inside the prison, run a call center, pay them the minimum wage in Singapore, which is about 500 US dollars a month. But we rehire them in the call center in the city when they're released from prison. And we employ 250 people, profitable business, expanding into 9 prisons in Indonesia, 9 women's prison in Indonesia, doing the same thing.
That's your next call today?
Yeah, that's after this.
Dave Moss, and then I got to talk to the Singaporean prison.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people talking to both. You're not the only one talking to both of us today.
So it could be all kinds of things. So we got an AI company providing a relatively affordable AI platform for 5 to 10-year-olds. How are we going to get this into our schools in the slums? Because these kids are so disadvantaged when it comes to access to technology. They don't even have a smartphone. They don't even have computers. Now we're talking, they don't even have AI. How are we going to get these kids, right, to skip and get some access to some AI training?
I see AI as a very equalizing thing, particularly when it comes to grant writing.
It is.
One of the things that's true, I was able to be a successful grant writer because I was, I had the education in the back, and I had very strong writing skills, which is a privilege to have. I worked hard in school, but like not everybody who's a leader in their community can write at a very high level. And of course, for a very long time, in order to win a grant, you had to be able to write at a very high level. And in some ways that was keeping out. And like, if we want to fund, particularly like groups run by marginalized folks who really know their communities, they are much less likely to be able to write a grant proposal.
Yeah,
like I can.
Absolutely.
And so
even if they can, the quality won't be great.
AI can level that playing field in a way that disadvantages me. Fine. That's not why I got in. I didn't get into this work to maintain my advantage, right? But if these AI tools, or if they continue to be accessible only by folks who already had those skills, we're not going to see that effect. And the potential for it to be equalizing is still there.
The technology poverty is just growing. Right? We're very conscious in terms of thinking, how can we try and close that gap? And one of the projects that's going on is a bus with about 40 terminals powered by AI. You drive this digibus into the slum school, and these kids, 40 kids, get an hour of computing experience each day. That's one way of providing access. And now we're thinking, how can we throw AI into that for these 8 to 10-year-olds so they start learning how to use AI in a healthy way? And then we have a chain of low-cost schools called Bridge and New Globe, where we charge $5 per child per month, using, again, technology on tablets with the curriculum. Parents pay us by mobile money. Today started with one school in 2009. Today we're 10,000 schools, 3 million kids in schools. How are we going to get AI into these schools? We're just about to take on a contract for 5,000 more schools in Congo and Rwanda. We'll add another 1 million kids into the schools. How are we going to get AI into this generation so that they're less disadvantaged? Right, they're trying to close that gap. Mm-hmm. So it has to be intentional.
Well, thank you very much for reaching out, coming on to the show. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
No, pleasure.
Do you have some? I'm going to give you a chance to some closing thoughts. Whatever you want to say. If there's something that you didn't get a chance to share, if you want to repeat yourself, why don't you take us home?
I would say carry on doing the philanthropy. We need more schools, clinics, orphanages, and so on. But maybe start doing an allocation for longer term investments that can create real jobs with dignity, that can be truly transformative for communities, right? Mm-hmm. And also, reach out to us. We work with family offices and philanthropic organizations. Show us some of your most promising projects that with some new capital, with some new management, right, we can make them sustainable and scalable. My experience from the VC world is that businesses and projects fail not because they're not any good, but because they are undercapitalized. They're too small. And these small projects, what happens with these small projects is that the founders spend more time fundraising than running the projects, running the programs. So we believe in giving these projects sufficient capital so they can focus on growing the enterprise and projects rather than spending time just worrying about next month's salary, where's that going to come from?
So this has been a conversation with a disillusioned philanthropist. And while, would you say, you continue to be disillusioned?
No, it's just a term.
Disillusionment has faded.
No, we work.
The disillusionment has not caused you to abandon philanthropy.
It hasn't caused me to abandon.
Just to
do philanthropy in a different way. Yeah.
Very good. And I think we need more of that. As I mentioned a few times today, philanthropy is a very young field. First RFP happened in the 20th century. The grant proposals as a term of art and an actual profession didn't happen until the 60s and 70s. And philanthropists like yourself, boards at places like Templeton and others, are continuing to think and change and come up with new vehicles and ways that they can do this. And it's happening on the grant maker side as well. There's new types of work to fund. There's all kinds of new things happening. Yeah. That's what's very exciting for me. I get to read all kinds of new proposals every year, hear from all kinds of different people doing cool work. Sounds like you and I have we come from very different places, but we both have monosyllabic names, Kim Tan, Dave Moss, right? You can say both our names very quickly. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'll let you get back. You've got an important call with a prison in Singapore. I have work to do as well, not quite as interesting.
It's been a pleasure, Dave. And I know where to send people who have failed grant applicants.
Yes, please send the proposals to us. We need evaluators too. If you know anyone that wants to spend some time reading and giving some feedback. We operate a very large learning community. We're currently accepting proposals for our fall round. Proposals are due September 20th. We have 450 evaluators ready to read them and give helpful, candid comments. And we got more evaluators joining every day. Once this episode gets out there, like 2 or 3 people who listen to it are going to join the evaluation committee.
Okay, great.
So thank you very much for the recruitment help. And I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. This has been Open Door Philanthropy with Dr. Kim Tan. Thank you very much.